actually in Springfield, Ohio today, and I'm pretty excited. It's a beautiful, crisp, feels like fall day. And so we are at Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum, and I'm going to switch my camera around, and I'm going to introduce you to Pam Bennett. And Pam Bennett is the state coordinator for the Ohio Master Gardener program. She is also the Master Gardener coordinator for Clark County, which is the county in Ohio that we are in right now. She's also the interim director for the Chadwick Arboretums, and like some other extension friends we know, she has a hard time saying no. But she is here today to give us a tour and share some about the great work that's going on here in Middle Ohio. So we're about halfway between Dayton and Columbus, if y'all don't know where Springfield is. And so I'm going to turn the floor over to Pam and tell us a little bit about the history of Snyder Park right here in Springfield.
Well, first of all, Natalie, thanks for coming. It's so good to see you, and it's so good. Natalie and I were talking earlier. It's been 2 years since I've been able to get a Natalie Baumgartner hug. Really nice to see you in person. So I'm so glad you're here today. And the weather, I mean, Wednesday, it was as rainy and miserable as it could be. So we're so lucky today. So we are standing, as Natalie said, in Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum, which is a brand new garden and arboretum here in Springfield. About 2012, our extension office was sold. And it kind of was a disappointing thing because we had 5 acres of demonstration gardens that we were using for teaching purposes. At the same time, this piece of property, which is 83 acres, was a former golf course, was losing money. And so the Parks District had made a difficult decision. They shut the golf course down and they said, would you be interested? Is there any chance you might be interested in moving your gardens to this park? And we're like, are you kidding me? We're coming from a corporate park where there's, trucks and all this other stuff and very little parking, to coming to this great park district here called Snyder Park. So we started the gardens in 2014. We created a master plan. We are in the process of implementing that master plan. We walked the garden and we decided we're going to develop 53 acres. Now, that's not 53 acres of gardens, or I would not have any Master Gardener volunteers left. We have about 125 volunteers here in Clark County. And we decided we're going to take basically what we had at our old garden site and just kind of expand it like you might a cell phone picture. So we've got the various gardens, and Natalie and I are going to be able to show you a few of them today. And we decided to we started with our Victory Garden first. We have a 100,000 square foot Victory Garden where we actually raise produce. This year they raised 8,500 pounds, and that all goes to the food bank. We have a Garden of Eden, which we're going to take you to a little later. We have an early Ohio settlers garden that is all plants that were around in the 1800s when Ohio was settled. We won't get to see that today, but that is one of our popular garden sites. We've got an outhouse. We've got plants that are related to the outhouse, and some of you might be able to guess which plants those might be. And then we also have yellow jackets because we're high in our yellow jacket season. So if you see Natalie and I going like this today, that's because they're buzzing around our hair. And we are standing around the area that will eventually become the Springfield Foundation feature garden. So we do have donors involved. We have the community involved. We also try to ask other people in the community to help us with the park, the maintenance, the garden maintenance, instead of just master gardeners. So we want this to be a true community effort. Behind me, as I mentioned, we'll be developing the Springfield Foundation feature garden. It's not quite finished, but right behind the feature garden, you see the clubhouse. That was here since 1920s when they built the golf course, and that will eventually be renovated. We are able to use that for our educational programming, which is fantastic. We've got a great partnership with our Parks District, and we will use that for programming. Our dream would be to have that far end over there set up as like a little coffee shop. We've got a bike path that comes through the park. So we're hoping, someday you can get up, bike all the way through Clark County, stop here at Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum, have a cup of coffee, read, relax, walk the garden, and then go on your way in your bike. So this will be finished this fall. And then behind Natalie is the Wingert Tossy Pavilion. We had the Wingert family donate significant dollars to build this. It's a $250,000 pavilion that was just dedicated this year, and it was built last year. It will be kind of our gathering place. You can see a sidewalk going out from the pavilion. There will be 4 sidewalks. Everything kind of starts here, and then all of the sidewalks will go out from there. We've been really lucky to get a Springfield Foundation feature grant for accessibility. So you can see some of the brand new sidewalks that we have. It's very important that this garden remains accessible to the public. And of course, many of you, if you've been involved with Natalie for a while, you know that we talk constantly about the community and health benefits of horticulture. And that's one of the things that we want to promote here.
So this is just really a fun combination of Master Gardener emphasis as well as community partnerships. We have some demonstration gardens at some of our research and education centers. And so some of our other groups are always, oh, you know, it's so cool that they have those recs, but what can I do in my town? And this is really an example of any city where you can build a good collaboration with your Parks and Recs department. You can have this opportunity, right?
Absolutely. And this land was dedicated to the city in the 20s. It was set to be a green space in perpetuity. It can never be developed. So as the parks were trying to figure out what do we do with this golf course, the timing just worked really good for us because we needed a place to put a garden. The community is behind it. It was a little controversial because we closed a golf course that had been here for a long time, but we worked through that controversy. We have some memorial plaques that we'll put in our commemorative garden. We've got additional gardens planned. We'll be doing a perennial display garden. As I mentioned, a commemorative garden. We want to have eventually an outdoor amphitheater. So we have a master plan for this. And now as we get the money and raise funds, we're just implementing this piece by piece. And it is a partnership with a lot of people in our community. We're getting great feedback so far, and we are able to raise some money. So that's been kind of a nice benefit that the public, the community is behind us.
All right, that's awesome. So what we are going to do is walk you out just a little bit and you can see some of the applied research that's going on here. So the way we're going to do this morning is give you a little taste of Ohio. And then we have our friends Rachel and Lucas in Lebanon, and then we're going to bounce to them, and then we're going to come back to Pam and I in Ohio. So we're going to just show you as much as we can of great horticulture and Master Gardener education. So Pam, if you want to, while we're walking, we're trying to walk slow here so we don't bounce the camera too much. You can tell us a little bit about your background is actually in ornamental horticulture, right? So some of the trial work is right up your alley.
Absolutely. I started at a garden center when I first started my career. And one of my passions early on was annuals and herbaceous plants. And when I started in an extension in 1992, one of the first projects that we wanted to do with Master Gardener volunteers was field trials, looking at the variety of cultivars of annuals that are on the market. So in 1998, we started in earnest evaluating plants from all over the country in terms of the breeders. So we now have over 230 varieties of cultivars that we evaluate. We are working with various companies such as Dooman Orange, Ball Seed Company, Cicada, Suntory, many of the companies that are entering their species or their new cultivars into these trials. Now, the reality of it is they've done a lot of trialing, you know, Natalie, before they get it to market, they're not going to put a bad plant out there. So these plants really are more of a showcase, more of an effort for them to really do in certain areas. So right now we are trialing here in Clark County, and I'm also trialing in Chadwick Arboretum on campus. The cool thing about the opportunity to trial species or cultivars in both places is that our cultivar trials have always been with the philosophy that we're going to put them in and let them go, much like a homeowner or a commercial landscaper might do. Little maintenance. We fertilize them once with a 14 slow release fertilizer. We don't do weed control initially, but we do put a pre-emergent down 6 weeks post-planting. We don't mulch. You'll see no mulch in these beds. And we may take pest control action, like for deer, Japanese beetles if they get really bad, because the reality of it is if we don't do something, we won't have any plants in the trial. So there are some cases that we will do that. In our research report that we put out, though, we will let the breeders and the public know we had to use something for deer in this case, or we had to spray at certain times for Japanese beetles. We try to minimize, again, the input here. On campus, because we are on OSU campus and because we are also host to one of the biggest international floriculture conferences in the world, Cultivate, we have people coming from that conference to see the trials. And of course, our breeders, those who are entering these plants, they want things to look just perfect. So on campus, we give the high maintenance treatment. fertilizer, water on a regular basis. We mulch the beds. We do deadheading. And the great thing about it is now you can see how these plants do without any input or very little input. And on campus, you're going to see what they do with a lot of input. So we'll have in fact, right now we're gathering our research data. We're going to get the numbers and we'll put our paper together. Volunteers are immersed in this. They grow the plants from seeds. They plant them in the garden. They adopt some of these beds for weed control. And then I have about 5 volunteers here and 20 volunteers at Chadwick who are actually doing the evaluations during the summer. We then take all those numbers, we average that, and we come up with our final evaluation rating that we will use then for our report.
That's pretty cool. So the master gardeners are taking the data and actually doing the evaluation.
Yep.
Well, before we bounce to Lebanon to say hello to Lucas and Rachel, you want to show us some of your favorites from this summer?
Let's go. So if you see some of the petunias in front of us here, some of them are looking pretty rough. We had 2 weeks, almost 10 days, where we had 2 3-inch rainfalls and just knocked everything down. But if you look at some of these, like the Sardinia, the white, the Sumo pink, the Super Tunia Vista bubblegum, these things did not stop at all. And one of my favorites this year that is kind of new, it's come out from Proven Winners. It's called Super Tunia Jazzberry, Vista Jazzberry. It's this really great purple one right here on the end. And of course, purple is my favorite color, so I totally love this plant. So we don't deadhead here. And as you'll see with some of the plants, they're looking a little rough, but that just gives an indication as to whether they should be deadheaded or not deadheaded. Over there, you'll see the lantana. One of the other things that we evaluate, and we kind of do more anecdotally, Natalie, than we do qualitative data analysis, is pollinators. So as you look here on the coleus, and a lot of people don't like those flower blossoms of the coleus, but if you can look real close, you see the carpenter bees are just loving this plant. And you see other bees, which I see a honeybee, and I don't know all of my bee species, but coleus flowers are actually really valuable to pollinators. And I've seen hummingbirds on these as well. Of course, the lantana, our salvias, and our verbenas are probably the top 3 that we see for pollinators. And next year, our plans are to do some anecdotal observation. What kind of pollinators? There's a salvia unplugged pink over there that is alive with pollinators in the summer. I mean, it's just going crazy. The one next to it, unplugged so blue, not so much. So I think what we're going to do next year is try to figure out, we're going to have master gardener volunteers sit in the garden for about an hour and just try to see if they can identify what bee species visit what plants. So something fun that they can do, and also something we can learn.
All right, awesome. So master gardener volunteers taking pollinator data. That's pretty cool. If you've got any questions, feel free to bounce them in to the chat box. What I'm going to do right now is kind of bounce the proverbial microphone over to our friends in Lebanon, and we're going to let them say hello to some of the crazy tree people, and we're going to go find another spot here in Ohio. Rachel, Lucas, Carol, take it away.
Can y'all hear us just fine? We're here in Lebanon, Tennessee with the Wilson County Master Gardeners. We're actually on a specific grounds. Most people know it as the Wilson County Fairgrounds, but it has a different name. It's actually called the James E. Ward Ag Center. And James E. Ward was actually the first county director from the University of Tennessee here in Wilson County. And he was a very notable person in agriculture history in Wilson County. So before we call the grounds the Wilson County Fairgrounds, it's called the Ward Ag Center after James E. Ward. It's actually made up of 3 groups: Fiddler's Grove, Wilson County Promotions, and also the Ag Center themselves. But we're specifically in an area called Fiddler's Grove with Carol Walenga, who's been a master gardener for a number of years here in Wilson County. And she's one of our tree stewards, and she's going to explain a little bit about what she does here in our Arboretum. And hopefully, Carol, you can give us a little history on the Arboretum here.
Well, I can give you a little bit of history. We were officially certified in 2014, but when we started to look into having an arboretum, we realized that nobody knew anything about trees. And so instead of going right out to the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council and saying, we want to be an arboretum, which actually the fairgrounds did, and they said, you have to have everything, signage and all this stuff. We did classes. We first educated ourselves, and then we had classes, which we first had for our Wilson County Master Gardeners, and then we opened it up for the state, anybody in the state who wanted to come out and do that. Our first class technically was Justin Stefanski. He did it in 2010. And then in 2011 and 2012, we did classes. And let me tell you, it was wonderful. Everybody went home and they started mulching their trees properly. And instead of having a swear jar, we had a jar where you had to put in a quarter every time you wanted to tell somebody, you've got a mulch volcano. You can't do that. So we've come a long way. In a TUFC, I said that. Nobody knows
what does that mean?
Okay. Yep. Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is the certifying entity for Arboretum in Tennessee. They were founded in 1991 and is a not-for-profit 401 C3. Thank you. Okay. And they were actually formed in the same year Fiddler's Grove was formed, 1991. The Wilson County Promotions or Wilson County Fair, and now Wilson County Fair, Tennessee State Fair as of this last August. They were founded in the same year. Well, let's start with some of the things around Fiddler's Grove, and then we can, Lucas, you can tell me what I need to tell you.
Yeah.
Come look at the inside of this grain bin. It is a tree stump, and look how big that is. It's because it grew long enough. We don't let anything grow long enough now. During the tornadoes, the last 2 years, we've been decimated in here, in this arboretum, decimated. As you can see, we have a new roof over the corn crib, but the corn crib is still intact. So we're really happy about that. But we had the tornadoes, then we had the fire, we had derecho winds, 2 deals of derecho winds, which is shear winds. I didn't know there was a name for multiple. And then we had a fire in the back where lightning struck some gas in the back. So we've had a really challenging 2 years. And then, of course, we had COVID. And so for the last 2 years, we've had a hard time getting people out because we're all old people for the most part. We got a few young people in, a few whippersnappers, but a lot of us have been in. So let me show you what we did. This is what we do for our sign.
Oh, yeah.
Do they do Century Farms elsewhere?
They're all.
Okay. We have a Century Farm museum here. That's kind of cool. We don't have too many baby trees, but this is a baby tree because our dogwood, our Cornus florida, which is the normal everyday type of flowering dogwood, was going down, so we had to replace it. So this is, if you see, this is going to be called the genus. Think of that as your last name. And then Florida is, think of it as your first name. It's a species. And species is species, whether it's plural or singular. So that's a good thing to know. But before you start even thinking about an arboretum, you need to know about which trees not to either plant or to consider. And things like the ash over here, you don't want to plant. Obviously, when we had it in 2014, we didn't think we were going to be a quarantine EAB county. So we have a white ash, we have a big green ash in the back. But if you look, there's a lot of blonding on the tree, you know, where the insects have come. We have a lot of, usually when you see an emerald ash borer attack a tree, you're not going to see it down here. You're going to see less of a canopy at the top. And then as you go down, you're going to start seeing D holes. It looks like a D on the side, which means a flathead borer's in it. And not all flathead borers are destructive. The EAB is. So anyway, don't do anything that's an invasive. Don't even put it on your list because the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council is not going to let you use it. One of the things you might want to go to, this is not TUFC, grab some stuff from my old box. This is from the Arboriculture Society. It's the everyday person side of it. Go to treesaregood.org. And this is online, but this is a cool book to have. So we have several of the books. And if you want to know how to make your home nice, if you want a tree sanctuary for your own home, if you want an arboretum for your area, this will tell you how to mulch, how to prune, how to put different trees in, whether it's ball and burlap, whether it's a potted. And all you have to do is go to treesaregood.org. If you want to do a arboretum, you need to go to tufc.org. And let's just look at some trees for right now.
And the arboretum has different levels. So like level 1, you have to have a minimum of 25 different species of trees. Level 2, I think, is 100. Level 3, I think, goes all the way up to 500. So it kind of depends on how many species of trees you actually have planted in your area. And a lot of these we didn't plant. They were just here to begin with. So we just had such a diverse group of trees in Fiddler's Grove here that it worked out fine. Now, a lot of these have been planted, but we lost some during the tornado last year. We've had some issues, but luckily we've planted a lot more over the past couple of years. But there has been some hiccups with some of the trees. So you'll kind of see some of the ash trees that's been here for years starting to go down, and we think they'll kind of be gone pretty soon. We're actually walking up on one of our butterfly sanctuaries, our Monarch Way Station, but we have plenty of arboretum trees surrounding it. I think this first one's actually a Zelkova.
It is. We had a sassafras right here, and it went down, hit the fence, and hit the garden. So that obviously is gone. To your right, there is, I know you're going to say it's a hackberry. Yes, it's a hackberry, but it's a sugarberry, which is a different variety. It used to be an arboretum tree, but if you go up in it, the tornado took some of the branches off. So it is no longer able to be an arboretum tree. And I'm going to tell you this. I'm going to let my t-shirt speak. Can you see it?
Topless trees are indecent.
Right.
So the tornado took the top of this tree out. We did not plan on cutting the top of this. I don't think we actually lost any trees in the tornado.
Yes, we did.
We did. I know some got disfigured, like this poor tree right here. So it does look like it was topped, but that was weather.
Tornado.
Weather did that. So it wasn't actually us. So you'll see a few in here that, like this one, that the label was pulled out of.
You'll also see some granite, and you'll see in memory of, and we're from now on, and we're doing in memory of, we're going to put it in here instead of here. Before we started the Master Gardeners started to do the Arboretum, when we started looking into it in 2010, the fair was looking into it, and they were going to do it in memory of different people. That's a fabulous way to start an arboretum. Another fabulous way to start an arboretum is if you have a cemetery. I know this sounds weird and goofy, but the cemeteries usually have old, big trees, and they usually don't mess with them. So if you want to make that cemetery have, what would you call them, a sponsor of it, and you can help them. Our sponsor out here is Wilson County Promotions, Fiddler's Grove, the fair. They help us a lot. They've helped us with, I'll show you our Master Gardener building. They've helped put like cement down and helped us with all this kind of stuff. This is a relatively new, it's only a few years old, the Monarch Garden. And what people don't realize is you need trees. If you love butterflies, you need trees. And one of the best kind of trees you can have is oak. Oaks are the generalist of the tree nation. And if you look back here, you see the tall station, and you see that oak right there that's just past the white fence. That's a swamp white oak. And oaks are great for butterflies. They feed them, they hide them. They're just wonderful. But you might want to walk through here. I know this is called the Baddour Parkway Arboretum and Demonstration Gardens. But for our purpose as Master Gardeners, we break them down into the Arboretum, the Demonstration Garden, the Monarch Garden, different little gardens we have throughout Fiddler's Grove. So do you want to walk through and see? We're kind of proud of it, you know.
we're extremely fortunate to have the grounds here. So we thank the Ward Ag Center for letting us do all this stuff. So if we didn't have it, we probably wouldn't be able to do half of what we're able to do with the community. And we consider the fair that happens every year probably the biggest classroom for us. So it works out well. In our case, we try to get these gardens looking fantastic, usually the second or third week of August, because we're going to have hundreds of thousands of people walk through. And what's the best way to expose them to the different gardens, the Arboretum, our vegetable trial gardens, is have them actually walk through some of these things. We couldn't be able to do it without their support, and it works out well in our community. And it helps out that our office is right beside the ground, so we're able to pop over here anytime we want.
Right. And we do little things like this, where kids can sit here with a little headband that's got little antennas, and they take pictures of as a butterfly during the fair, during things like Spring Fest. We have all kinds of activities going on. Oh, look at the little button bush over here. Yeah. That's kind of cute. Button bush is very, and if you notice, we have a lot of rocks around our trees and around our gardens. The only way I can say is we used to call it being thrifty. We call it being cheap, but it's a natural resource. We work with whatever we have. We had a lot of trees get torn up and buildings get torn up, and then they just made lemon into lemonade. Like they made the fence that got knocked down. They fixed that with trees and worked out pretty well. So each of these little buildings, this is called Fiddler's Grove Historical Village, because this wasn't here originally. Originally, during World War II, since this is a limestone floodplain, tanks were approved on this ground. Yeah, you wouldn't think there'd be anything left, but there is. So we are a flood zone. So you're gonna see a lot of trees that normally you see trees that you would prune in the winter, in the spring, early spring. But we have a lot of what's called bleeders. This was one of the memory ones that they started. This maple, any maple, is a bleeder, which means if you cut it in the winter, it's going to bleed and bleed and bleed and bleed. So if you have to prune the tree, you want to do it when it has a full canopy. So maples, willows, different things like that are bleeders, you do want to make sure. And then you need to learn about insects and know that this is actually a bird. This is the yellow belly sapsucker, which we all laugh because when we first were looking at trees, we didn't know that existed. And it's going after the bugs. And this one's going for the sap, actually, but you'll see where it'll have bugs going in. Lucas talked about James Ward. This was his smokehouse right here. And
they actually took apart his smokehouse. He was such a community legend and brought it here as one of the first buildings that was kind of brought over here. So they brought his smokehouse. It's kind of right in the middle of our arboretum here. So you'll see a lot of trees around. And we want to encourage you to go to this. We're not the only arboretum in the state. There are plenty of arboretums in our state. You can find maps of them online. I think it would be good if you just bought a new piece of property, you're trying to figure out what trees to plant, go look and see what actually looks successful at some of these arboretums. If a tree in two different arboretums looks like trash, it's probably not a good tree to plant. Let somebody else spend their money and kill it before you actually plant it. I would rather do that. And then come to these different arboretums. Now, we have them in all three parts of our state. So I know you may say, well, I'm in Memphis. Well, Memphis has plenty of arboretums around there. So make sure you kind of look at the maps online under the Tennessee Urban Forestry Council to see where your arboretums are that's closest to you.
Oh, and I hate to show this tree because we haven't done this tree. I'm sorry about that. Stephanie, sorry. This tree over here, this dogwood. It's called a rough leaf dogwood. If you feel the leaf, you'll figure out why. Anyway, it was one of our 50K trees across Tennessee. And each year it gets more and more and bigger and bigger. And so if you see, we talked about the genus and the species. If you see a name after it, that's the person who discovered it, named it. You're going to see a lot of L's because Linnaeus. You're going to see that. This right here to your left is a Thuya plicata. It's a big arborvitae, and I love it because Barbara Martinez used to be the tree steward for this one. And she was born in a Bavarian town. And they had a tree like this in the middle of town, and they called it the tree of life. Well, what does arborvitae mean? You know, tree life. So that's kind of cool. Look at that. It's going this way. We're going towards the eastern red cedars. If you see the blueberries up on this one, that means it's female. And the lady who did that, was a tree steward for that. She would put these little berries in her sauerkraut and make excellent sauerkraut. But it's mostly well known for flavoring gin. Also, making number 2 pencils. We were a big site for making number 2 pencils. And if you see over here, we have all kinds of trees. This is a volunteer tree. And this little park here, Volunteer Park, was made so that people could come during the fair and sit and enjoy. You know, sometimes it gets hot and you need to sit down. So we have people who bought leaves for different volunteers up there. And that's wonderful. And then you'll see, we do have one of the Eastern Red Cedars is one of our arboretum trees. To your right, we have a black locust. Now, I know all of y'all are jumping up and down and saying black locust is a trash tree. But black locust is my favorite tree because when it starts to flower, and I know this is anecdotal, there's no more hard freezes that are, you know, going to kill off anything. You can start planting. And the bees love it because people think this is a trash tree. They leave it alone. They don't poison it. And the bees love the flowers. So I like the black locust, even if y'all don't. So we also have all these different little historical buildings that have come around. To your left, Bo, the great black educator, a little building where he had taught before. All sorts of cool things. Bay's bread, you know, Cracker Barrel gets their bread from Bay's. That's a little original building. And this, we have 2 schoolhouses in Fiddler's Grove. This one was a traditional black school, the Wheeler School, and W.E. Du Bois, I can't say French, taught in this school. Can you imagine being in such a small little schoolhouse? The other schoolhouse we have on the other side was used for years, and some of the people who are still alive, it was used as a lunchroom after it was used as a actual school. To your right over here, we have the Master Gardener demonstration garden, and we're real proud of that. Of course, the fair's over now, so, you know, it's some of the fruit's going to be on the ground. We got to clean it up.
It's starting to wane a little bit now because we normally have this garden to be at the peak.
Yes.
The 2nd or 3rd week of August, which is the fair. And this is one of the reasons people come back every year to see what we planted. We appreciate Dr. Bumgarner. She sent us seeds every year. So we've been able to do some of the trials that some of you are doing, the home garden vegetable trials. So some of them are actually over here in the gardens. So it works out well. So we have this great relationship. They even built us our own building over here. So we have that, and it works out well for us when we have small meetings.
And so this, every year for the last few years, Rosemary has done the trials, and people come to the fair and they want to know how to do it. So it's a great educational opportunity. This right here was done by, my brain just went blank.
Dan?
Yeah, Dan. Oh my goodness, my brain is going. Dan Goosetree. He made this for us. He was a blacksmith. We have the blacksmith shop right over there. The blacksmiths make the sign part, not the sign part, the stake part for our arboretum, which is very nice. He made this gourds in the grove. If you go to the Cedars of Lebanon, which we have a little butterfly garden out there, he did the pelican. And if you go to downtown Nashville over by the market, there, Paige, his wife, and Dan had made bicycle racks. And they're the ones that were the tomato slices and then the corn. So if you'll get over there, we're real proud of our master gardeners.
We'll keep walking around and you'll see one of the things for an arboretum tree. It'll actually have the label on the tree.
Yeah.
So a lot of our trees are not labeled. So that means there's probably one of some species somewhere labeled in the arboretum. So that was one of the main things. For it to be an arboretum tree, it has to actually be labeled in the gardens. And like Carol was saying earlier, it can't be an invasive species. So I would hate for someone to have a privet labeled or, a Bradford pear labeled somewhere. So here's another one right here in the garden. And this is actually in our Master Gardener demonstration gardens, but serviceberry, Amelanchier. And
this was another one of our sponsors, the Gift of Modern Woodmen. They gave us 17 trees, mulch for it. They also put in an office and a bathroom at the back of Town Hall for us. And then it made it handicap accessible. So we've had great sponsors. Here's a cherry bark oak. This one is not a arboretum tree, but we do have one over close to the caboose and the train station. So this is, I don't know, I'm prejudiced. I love it.
Since we've only got about a minute left, we want to encourage you to come out. Pretty much if it's daylight, you're welcome to walk through our demonstration gardens here at the Ward Ag Center. You're able to walk through the Arboretum. If you have questions or if you're a Master Gardener group from the county and you want to schedule a time to walk with one of us, we can do that as well too. Just let us know like, hey, I'm from so-and-so county. We'd love to take a trip over to see the Arboretum and walk the gardens. That would be fantastic because, talking to us, we hate to talk. I know you could tell that today.
We used to do so many PowerPoints. I can't even tell you. We have things like that. We also do things like when we became the EAB, we became one of the bad counties. We hosted the USDA to do the talk about that we were quarantined. So, we try to work with everybody. So
we'll come out and see us. Wilson County Master Gardeners. I'm Lucas Holman. This is Carol Walenga. So come out if you have any questions.
We'll turn it back over to you, Natalie.
All right, that was awesome. Lucas and Carol, two of the most quiet, shy people that you will ever get on camera. So that was really cool to hear them talk a little bit about their arboretum. And Pam, as we get kicked off, I don't know if you want to tell them a little bit about what you have planned for the future here as far as arboretum.
So you guys did a great job of motivating us and inspiring us because we are called Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum. We want to be an arboretum. We're not even close to that close bottom level of being an arboretum because we were a former golf course. I bet I could count on my hand 5 or 8 species. Everything was ash. Everything was sycamore. We have a few gladitsia. Everything was planted in rows. So we have linear trees, but we are wanting to become an arboretum. So James Wills, who's with our city forestry department, gets seedlings, cuttings, or not seedlings, I guess they would be seedlings, from J. Schmidt Nursery out in Oregon. And he plants them way back in the back part of our arboretum. And he has like a tree nursery now that he's starting to grow these trees. He's got some right now, some bald cypress, some other trees that are probably about an inch caliper and maybe about 8 feet tall, perhaps. He needs to dig about 90 some trees this fall, and he needs places to put them. And I said, oh, guess what? We have 53 acres and the need for diversifying our species. So he's going to be planting probably around 60, and we'll take whatever he doesn't plant in the city, and we're going to put them here in the Arboretum. Our first goal is to try to get rid of that linear look where we have all the fairways where the golfers would hit the trees, and also to start to diversify our species. We are using our Master Gardener volunteers to help with this. They have an assignment. We gave our tree subcommittee, each of them got 2 to 3 genre, and they are researching that genre. So maybe one's doing maples. They're looking at all the species, and they're going to do a presentation for our committee as well as our Master Gardeners about the benefits of this tree, the good things about it, and maybe the drawbacks. So as we start developing the Arboretum, again, just like all good Master Gardener volunteer programs, we are going to make that an educational opportunity. So at some point in time, we need to talk to you guys to try to figure out how you got up and running, because it just sounds like what a fantastic program you guys have going on down there.
We were just driving around this morning talking about how Pam wants to have some of her volunteers become tree stewards and help manage the young plantings. And we won't show you those because they had an unfortunate pruning event, but it'll be an educational opportunity, right, Pam?
Yeah, poor James. He's our city forester and his crew. Springfield, Ohio is like 61,000 people. Small crew. We are very fortunate to have a forester. You know, we did a tree survey several years ago with our Master Gardener volunteers. We had a signature program called Why Trees Matter. So we did a survey and we actually used the iTree program to get the numerical value of trees. Because, you know, we're tree huggers. We know why trees are important, but our stakeholders don't always know that dollar and cents value. Once we did that, James' budget was jumped up quite a bit for tree planting. And his crew is not all certified arborists. He's working with them. And he told one guy to go out and take out the suckers in the tree nursery. And the poor guy thought that meant limit up. And he kind of left some stubs. So we thought, well, how about if our Master Gardener volunteers get involved next year? And when you plant these, we'll do the staking, we'll do the tree, central leader development, we'll do the pruning.
Pruning, we know it will improve dramatically.
Boy, are they.
So speaking of Master Gardeners, we've got somebody here we want to introduce you to.
Come on over, Dennis. Dennis Latimer is our summer assistant here at Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum. We have been able to raise about $10,000 to help. We have to have somebody down here during the summer. We just can't do it with all volunteers. So Dennis was in the class of, what year was it? 2016. He loved horticulture. He was not a horticulturist before, loved horticulture. He is one of those volunteers like all of you, just soaks up the knowledge. And consequently, when we were looking for a summer person, Dennis is like, I'll do it. So he's been here since. And come on up, Dennis, so they can hear you. Now he's going to ask you some questions.
Okay.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your history in the Master Gardener program. What got you hooked?
Well, I came down to the clubhouse one evening about 6 years ago, and Pam was giving a presentation about this concept of a arboretum. And there was a fellow who tapped me on the shoulder behind me. His name was Ed Wozniak. And he said, you ever think about being a Master Gardener? And I said, well, I'm thinking about it. He said, well, if you do, I'll be your sponsor. So when that wintertime came, I signed up for the class. It was wonderful. We had a great crowd. There's probably maybe, I want to say quarter to half of those people in the class still with us. And there's been classes in the future, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger. But this summer job that I have down here at the Arboretum is wonderful because unlike most part-time jobs, everybody works indoors, and you cannot beat being out here in the fresh sunshine and working with plants and taking care of the things that I love to do. Have never always been a gardener. I guess it started back in the 80s when I got hold of my first Mother Earth News magazine, and they had this doing a garden inside in your backyard, and that's kind of what got my interest peaked and everything. And other than that, worked for a living and then retired and then became a Master Gardener. So I'm the groundskeeper here and take care of all these gardens. And we started out with just a few, and it keeps growing and growing and growing. And I think we just ran out of hoses and water sources, but we'll fix that later on. But everything is up and running and beautiful. Now it's starting to die back a little bit, but the season continues until we start to kind of shut down in November. And the last thing that I'm responsible for is making sure that there's compost working, and the leaves that we collect is for next year. So there's a lot of responsibility here, but it's a blast to be here. So
no demo garden is complete without some dedicated composting. So we are actually in the middle of the Garden of Eaton.
Eatin
apostrophe.
That's right.
And so for the couple minutes that we have left, do y'all want to show us a little bit about what you've got here?
Okay, Pam. Go ahead.
Well, we'll both show you.
Yeah.
So the Garden of Eaton was designed by one of our volunteers who's also an artist. And Susie Brody just was incredible in her thought. The whole idea here is to make it a demonstration garden. Make sure that people can come here and in these whimsical little areas, they can plant a garden and be successful. You don't have to have that big 20 by 40 square foot area for, a vegetable garden. You could do it in a small container or in a little area in your backyard. They try to feature different vegetables each year. This last year, I think it was tomatoes. This year, it's peppers. And they've got all kinds of peppers. In fact, we just ate one of Jimmy Nardello's. I've never had that one before. Natalie, you said you've had it. Yeah. Wonderful, wonderful, long, skinny pepper. So they try to get as many different varieties as they can find and just, again, demonstrate it. They've got a little kiosk over there where over the years, people have said, well, what are these varieties? So they put all the seed packets in the kiosk so that when you see something here, you can find what number it is and you can see the actual seed packet and where it comes from. It's also quite whimsical because one of our volunteers designed our shed. I don't know if you can see the shed.
Yeah, let's walk over and see the shed.
So one of our volunteers designed the shed, and another one who is just an incredible woodworker, he actually built the shed, and it's kind of that like Dr. Seussical type thing. Just really cool. And that is, of course, where all of our materials are stored. Because we are 53 acres and these gardens are really spread out, when we first started designing this, Natalie, everybody wanted to have their garden up by the barn, which is where all of our materials are. And it's like, okay, you guys, we can't all be right there by the tools. So we said, each garden can have some type of tool storage. We talked about the early Ohio settlers earlier. They have the outhouse for their tool storage. Well, this is their tool storage. They also have a grill in there because during our events and activities and programming, we also take everything from the garden and show people how they can grill it.
And this is a great area right here to have an outdoor.
A little closer. I'm a little closer so I can hear you.
Yeah, and this is a great area over here to have an outdoor event because you have all this open space and with some seating around here. It's kind of like Emerald Live, and so the food can actually be collected right here.
Tell them about last night's program.
Last night's program was seed saving, which is extremely important. We found out last night that there's only just a few companies that hold seeds for the entire world. And it's really important to have these seeds be in as impure state as possible, because after a while, there's not going to be anything left but just hybrids. And so there are certain seeds that are collected up in an iceberg. And the speaker talked about how during climate change, the iceberg started to melt. And they were concerned that the seeds would be lost as well, but they were able to gather them all up and keep them safe, regardless of the melting of the iceberg. I was going to say, if you pan around what we've got right here, you'll see a bunch of cut logs and everything. And the beauty of Susie Broidy's plan, timing is everything. She came to the site when they had dropped 2 huge sycamore trees into the yard, and they were just going to simply cut them up. Susie asked National Trails guys with their chainsaws if you could cut them up in a certain length so she could use them as a fence. So the beauty of this is you use the resources that you have on hand. It doesn't always cost money. It just takes time and effort and everything. So,
and because this was a former golf course, there were some really nice burls. Of course, this is a sycamore. Sycamore wood is not really very reliable to last a long time. We are starting to see a little bit of decay. I brought my husband out here and said, I want these burls and I want these pieces to take home. So he started cutting, and about 76 foot up into the tree, we found golf balls. And of course, we've found them periodically. In fact, the one going back to the 9th hole, there was a beech tree that was multi-stemmed. It had to come down because it was really in bad shape. When the guy cut into it, in the crotch of that beech tree, there were 32 golf balls. So the 9th hole, we're raffling those golf balls off to those people who probably hit them up there and were not very good golfers. The other thing you'll see in here, over there to the left, and you saw up around the shed here, we have access to some items that were salvaged from Memorial Hall. We all have those big buildings in our communities that you don't want to take down, but they're too expensive to renovate. So one of the big missions pieces that we have here is to maintain the history of Clark County. So we have been given access to all of those pieces. And I don't know, Natalie, if you can show, these were on the building, and then over there to the right, we have access to all of the remaining pieces to use in the garden. So we are going to make use of them in a variety of ways. You can see right here, they're used by the shed. Over at the entrance, they are also used. They're beautiful pieces. There's some granite pieces as well. And one of the thoughts is that eventually we may take all of the pieces, scatter them throughout the gardens, and make it kind of like a treasure hunt for kids. You know, show them, here's what Memorial Hall used to look like. Now find these pieces. And I have actually seen pictures where I found a couple of these pieces where they appeared on the building.
Plus, at the end of the garden, this wrought iron fencing that goes all the way around, from the generosity of a master gardener and her husband. They were at an auction and they had picked up all of these and then donated them to us. And this fencing is from an area in Springfield around one of the local houses that's still around. But the handiwork and the ironwork that was done on this is just incredible, and it has lasted over 100 years. So.
Yeah, and so I'm sure many of you are saying, well, it all sounds wonderful, it sounds great and grand, but what about some of the problems and challenges? And we definitely are not without our problems.
We can walk over and see your groundhog fence.
Yeah. So we're not without our problems. We have a high deer population. Ideally, if we could build a 10-foot wrought iron fence around this entire area, wouldn't it be wonderful? But that would cost a whole lot of money, and we can't do it. So we are using those problems as a teaching tool. And we have found ways to control some of this. Dennis just removed our deer repellent, and we had a guy come in and install the cameras and the sprinkler system. And it actually works great. We have not had deer in here for 2 years now. When the deer come in, they don't like water spray. So they would come in, they'd get knocked, they'd get that water spray and it repels them. And I tell you, it has been incredible. Then the other problem that we had was groundhogs. When we first put this in, we put 3 foot of chicken wire down below and a 1 foot space out flat so they couldn't dig under. Well, they got smart. They don't dig under, they go over. So they easily got in. So again, our wildlife expert came in and he put this fence here, and you can see it's down into the ground, but it's got this little area right here. And again, when you're learning about wildlife management, knowing their habits, knowing how they work, they function, he said they don't like anything that's not steady. So if they climb up on here, they hit this, they'll try to climb over it. It scares them, it keeps them away. Or if they jump on it, it scares them because it's very unsteady. Now, does it look great for the garden? Well, it's not aesthetically what we'd like to have, but it's a great teaching tool. So people who have come, we've told them about that. Unfortunately, one of our tours that I did for one of our funders, we found out the hard way about the deer control, that we had to turn it off at like 7 a.m. before people came into the garden. So we learned the hard way, but hey, it's like Dennis said, it's just so great to be outside, to be in, this natural environment. And boy, I'll tell you what, myself and our Master Gardener volunteers consider us very, very lucky to have this opportunity to develop this Snyder Park Gardens and Arboretum. And we want y'all to come visit.
Yeah, road trip up to Ohio.
There you go. There you go.
That's right.
There you
So
go.
I want to say thanks so much to Dennis and to Pam. We're going to stand here for a few minutes. We got a couple more minutes at the end of the call, but I know that Rachel would like for us to snap back to Lebanon for a few minutes.
Hey, everyone. So I just wanted to show you a little bit of the backside of Fiddler's Grove. And this is what happens when you are on site at a Master Gardener demonstration. I found a Master Gardener in the wild. We found her out here working. And as you can see, she's kind of renovating this little area. Got some cedar chips from the Grant Cedar Mill, which is amazing if you're familiar with that location. And you can see here, she has one of the dwarf Coosa dogwoods that is part of the Arboretum, but it's also just part of her little shade garden kind of area back here. And she is adding some more plants. And this is the perfect weather for gardening today. So we just wanted to pop back on here and say, come visit Fiddler's Grove, come visit Wilson County and walk around. Again, this is free and open to the public all the time during the daylight hours. And you can look inside all of these cute little buildings, learn. A lot of them are open, opened up, but there's a gate where you can stop and learn. And again, come say hi to the Wilson County Master Gardeners.
All right. Well, we got some beautiful sunlight here. So I'm going to just let Pam say goodbye here from Ohio. We so much appreciate you hosting us. We would absolutely love to do this for some of your master gardeners maybe sometime in the future. So this has been fabulous. We'd love to return the favor. You want to say goodbye?
Absolutely. And Natalie, we definitely want to do this. What a great idea. You've inspired me. Next year, we'll be doing this and have our volunteers come down to Tennessee. Thank you all. And I should have started out with hi, y'all. My grandparents had to move to Memphis when one of our buildings closed down here in Springfield. And ever since I was a tot, I'd go down there. I've got a picture of me in front of Elvis's gates I guess I was 6 weeks old. And my grandma, we called her Grandma Hi Y'all because that's all she said. So bye, y'all. I'm just so glad to have you here today to visit us. Come see us anytime.
All right. Thanks a bunch. Thank you all for joining us. We look forward to seeing you again for our next Friday Focus in November. Have a beautiful, beautiful gardening weekend. And thanks so much. We'll see you soon.